In just a second, I'm going to be joined by Jack Cole from WeDoTech.uk. Jack's head of this recruitment company. He's got a massive amount of experience in recruitment, and he is going to share tips on how to network effectively on LinkedIn, how to treat your job search as a sales process, and how to plan your career so that you're taking stepping stones to go forward. There's a lot in this podcast. Jack's going to share an awful lot of information. So if you haven't got a pen and paper ready, listen to the show, then come back later and make notes. But you're going to take stuff away from this that is going to help you. So without further ado, let's get started, and welcome to the EvilTester Show. Hello, Jack. Thanks for appearing on the show. So I'm Alan Richardson. This is Jack Cole. Jack, you're head of recruitment consultancy WeDo, and you've been in the testing, recruitment, and development recruitment space for quite a long time. And I've seen you around at different events, and I've been at some of your events because you do the leadership forum.
Yeah.
And you did other events beforehand. And because you've been doing a lot of posts and things on LinkedIn, and you've been helping people with advice and stuff there, I thought I'll see if I can convince you to come on here and talk about it, because I get asked a lot of questions about recruitment and how to get jobs, and I cannot answer them because my career has been different and jumped around lots of different roles and completely non-standard, and I would not advise that career path for anyone, because it seems much easier to get a job if you're doing the job you want to do, and people seem to look at just the last role you've got, whether you can do the next one. So I probably find it harder to get jobs than other people, but I'm hoping that you can give people advice on getting jobs and things. So that's a fairly big intro. So hello, Jack.
Look, mate, pleasure. Like you said, we've known each other for a long time. So when you reached out, honoured to be on the show, and hopefully I can give some kind of perspective on what's actually happening in the market and people take some value from it.
So what is happening in the market if we start there?
Yeah, the $1 million question, mate. I don't know if anyone really knows what is happening. I think that I live in quite a small world of, like, we are a small business of 7 people. So we get busy very quickly. So I might look through things through rose tinted glasses, but I can maybe give you a perspective of other people that I also know in recruitment and other leaders. So I guess in preparation to the show, to make sure that I'm giving my view as well as other people's views, it's quite evident that what I'm experiencing is what other people are experiencing in the market. So it's been a tough old place for QAs for the last 2.5 years, really. I think that when there is market volatility, QAs are often the first to go in the business, which is where we see mass redundancies. And then when the market recovers, it's often the slowest to recover. So, but yeah, to keep things on track and short, the market's overcrowded, it's saturated with loads of great talent in the market looking for work, and the supply and demand has a real imbalance. So when actually just looking at the data of people are available. So for anyone who doesn't know really how Recruiter works, you've got the standard version, which most people have, and then you've got LinkedIn Recruiter. LinkedIn Recruiter costs a recruitment business about £12,000 to £13,000 per year. And then you've got the back-end search functionality where we can search about 37 different ways to get talent into a nice compiled list. So when looking at the data around, let's just say, QA managers, lead QAs, principal QAs, quality coaches that have that leadership skill set, there's about 14,000 active profiles in the UK, with 4,000 of those that are actively open to work at the moment, compared to the 1,400 jobs that are then posted. So you can very quickly see that, there's massive imbalance. It's a buyer's market. So to stand out in today's market, you've got to have something uniqueness or something special about you that is either niche or super technical. Or we speak to clients, they want someone who's got experience solving problems in their world, i.e. if you've got experience in payments technology and you've got experience solving problems within payments technology and you've got the testing chops and the technical ability, then immediately you make it to the top of that particular list when it comes to hiring talent. And then I think that it becomes even more complicated for those that are like your heads of, your directors of QA. There's naturally fewer of those people. I actually can't remember the last time I've hired for a head of QA.
So maybe people are just sticking jobs out then.
Well, well, yes and no. So when I done my research, so it's overcrowded at the top. There's 1,300 people in the UK with the role title of like head of QA, director of QA, head of test. So this is not including your QA managers. This is strictly like your head of type levels. But of the 1,300, 460 of those are open to work. 124 of those have actually moved jobs in the last 12 months. So people are obviously hiring these individuals, but of the 124, 28 of those are already back on the market looking for new opportunities. Now, why is that happening? I don't think it's, maybe there is an element of natural churn where companies have hired, there's been some form of market shift, therefore redundancies have happened. But I think it's more of a case of people have hired a leader in the business, not really having a very clear roadmap of what they're looking to hire for, what the outcomes they're looking to try and achieve. And sometimes maybe a change of leadership. One CTO might see the value of having a head of QA in the business versus another CTO, which rather hire an engineer or manager that would then look after quality, and it's really pushed on the developers to do automation, and quality coaches are hired as a replacement rather than a head of. So yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because everything is in flux. When I look at LinkedIn, I see a lot of people who are very experienced, who've been out of work for a long time. Then people constantly coming up going, I'm out of work, I'm looking for new jobs. Yeah. I see jobs coming through that look like they're looking for experienced people, but they never quote salaries. And I suspect that whilst experienced people might apply to them, they look at it and go, actually, we want experience, but we don't really want to pay that much. And because there's so many people coming in for jobs, they'll happily knock the price down.
Yeah.
So then a lot of experienced people walk away from that. But you're also in a slightly different situation because you're kind of middleman between people who are looking for work, people who are hiring. Then you've got a whole bunch of people who are hiring directly, and they must just get swamped with applications coming through.
Yeah. When I advertise a job, and it's less frequent I actually advertise jobs nowadays because of just like the overwhelming response that I get from an advert. To put things in perspective, I went away on holiday last week, 5 days from the business, come back to 987 emails, but that was only across 2 jobs that were advertised. If you're a recruiter that just operates in the world of QA recruitment, for example, you might have anywhere between 8 to 10 different jobs on your desk at a given time, and all of a sudden that's thousands of applicants. And whilst there is automations and there is AI, I don't trust it enough at the moment to do the job that I've spent 14 years acquiring a skill set to assess. So that's all manually reviewed for me. So 2,000 CVs, if you've got 1 minute per CV, you're talking 30 plus hours of just reviewing CVs. So immediately my week is gone before I've even picked up the phone to anyone. So I now rely on the network that I've built over the 14 years of recruiting in this space, the people that I trust. So even if it is a niche position, I might give you a call, Alan, and be like, hey, Alan, I've got this job. You're well connected in this space. Who would you know that might be in the market that is worth me speaking with? And we are finding that is not unique to me. That is unique to is an application for pretty much all agency side recruiters. And we're now starting to see it with clients as well. So if you're an internal talent acquisition manager, you might be looking after a QA role, a developer role, a head of product position. They could have anywhere up to 15 to 30 jobs per talent partner. So everyone who's applying for these positions, they're just not going to get seen or heard unless you are maybe one of the first applicants or potentially one of the last. I think about my own experience when I do have review CVs, I'm very quick they come into my inbox. So I start looking through those. So I might start to assess those people, speak to those people quite quickly and find the people that I need. And then therefore everyone beyond that point, I might not need to give as much attention to the review of their application, rightly or wrongly. I just need to be able to protect my time. But if those initial applications have not made it from a client's perspective, then I need to then go back, review. And it might be a case that those that are the back end of the search might be the ones that we look at. So if you're in the middle, you might be out of luck a little bit. So if you're in the market and you are applying for positions, I would actually say be one of the first or be one of the last to potentially be seen and noticed a bit more. But I think you've got to do more in today's market, much like a recruiter. You know, our job's got a lot harder over the years. We got to do more to stand out, get recognized, get noticed, because there's more recruiters than there ever has been. And everyone's spinning the same line. Everyone's telling exactly the same story. So to get noticed, you need to do more. And I think candidates have got to do exactly the same.
So, so one of the things you're talking about there then is networking.
Yeah.
And that's that's also reminding people that you exist, not just reaching out saying, hey, do you have any jobs? Just like being noticed so that when a job comes through, they go, I remember seeing so-and-so had a post saying they were looking for work. On LinkedIn, I see lots of posts saying, never put out the open for work banner on your profile. And then other people saying, always put the open for work banner on your profile and put a hashtag open to work on LinkedIn. What does that make any difference? The open to work banner?
It does make a difference to me. If someone's got an open to work banner and they are maybe someone I've historically spoken to and I knew that they were good, or maybe they've interviewed for me previously, she encouraged me to reach out, and I might just be doing some exploration. Sometimes you find yourself in a bit of a vortex searching through LinkedIn. The next thing you know, you're 30 minutes deep into it and you've just gone from profile to profile to profile and you don't even know how you've got there in the first instance. But then you're like, actually, I know this person. Let me drop them a line. So, and I've placed people off the back of that. So in that instance, it does work, but I can see how the perception might be that, yeah, desperation or the reasons what, like, I don't know. I think that people, I've heard people say that, like, if they've got, open to work or if you're available immediately, you're a bit of a disadvantage because the good people are employed in jobs. I don't think that's true. I actually think that from my own experience recruiting in the space, maybe it's just the clients I work with, but they would actually prefer someone who is available immediately because they've normally got a problem they need to solve. They need to solve it bloody quickly. So if someone's got a 3-month notice versus someone who's available immediately, they would actually prioritize someone who's available immediately. I've actually got a client that's recruiting for someone in that exact scenario. They said to me, like, look, I would prioritize someone who's available immediately over someone who's got a 3-month notice. So on that basis, I actually think you've got an advantage, and you've got time to do tech tests. You've got time to do interview prep. You've got more time on your hands to give a better version of yourself versus someone who's employed where there's forever changing needs that they have to maybe adapt and pivot to.
Yep. And you also mentioned that people have to be more proactive because most people are not salespeople.
No.
So how do they learn to sell themselves, and what should they be doing to get noticed?
I'd still say that, like, apply for jobs via LinkedIn, as everyone is doing in today's market. But once you've made the application via LinkedIn, I would then make it an intentional effort to connect with the talent partner, if it's an obvious head of QA, QA manager, lead QA, connect with everyone who might have an influence in that space. And I would then drop them a personal line to explain the reason why you're connecting with them. Now, when obviously they accept that, that will then automatically go into your inbox. And I would then say, I've made an application for this position. I understand it's got 300, 400 to 10,000 applications, but here's some of the reasons why I feel like I'm good for it. But I would focus more on what problems you've got experience solving that is relevant to their world. Like I said, like if you've got fintech experience working within a startup scale-up type business where there's a uniqueness about the tools or the technologies that you've got experience working with, then I would then use that to compound that message of all the reasons why you're relevant and right. A lot of managers are, I might get told off saying this, but they're stupid, right? And they're stupid in the regard that they don't know every business out there. They don't know who they are, what their product is, what they represent, the maturity of the business, the maturity of the QA, the funding rounds that they are going through. But people in the startup space more often want people that have worked for startup businesses. So if your message is that, hey, I've worked for a business that when I joined, they're a Series A business, they're going through Series C, they're on track for an IPO, working on payment technology that is buy now, pay later. And I was responsible as an SDET for design and building their automation framework, that the outcome was reducing the delivery cycles by X, Y, and Z. So it's almost like, what was the situation you were hired for? What was the outcome of that situation? And what was the business value? And I think if you promote yourself in situation, outcome, business value, you've got something a bit more tangible than I've just got experience with Selenium, Rest Assured, Java, and AWS, you know?
And that's interesting. So what I'm taking from that is you've got the kind of marketing side where you have your LinkedIn profile, you've got your blogs, your GitHub profiles and everything else. That's your kind of static SEO marketing part. Then you do your prospecting. So you're looking at what are the jobs out there. You're trying to figure out whether you're suitable, whether you're not. And then you've kind of reversed it a little bit, because the advice people get is create a cover letter, adjust your CV for each job. What you're saying is maybe do that. Maybe that helps. But you need to do the follow-up. You need to do the connecting into the organization. You might not know exactly who they are. So you're going to have to do the research that all salespeople have to do when they're trying to get into a company. Look at who's involved there, who's connected to this. Yeah. Send them direct messages, connect, show them specific points of value, potentially specific links off to something else that might draw their attention.
Yeah.
And you actually have to sales pitch throughout the process. It's not just an application anymore. It's an actual sales pitch.
Yeah. I think that you need to then make sure that you're, if you have applied with your CV, then your CV then needs to match up to your LinkedIn profile. And then like, are people invested in their LinkedIn profile, their brands, and make sure that like, if you are going to the market and you're saying like, hey, I've got experience solving all of these problems, I'm the best fit for you. Do you have testimonials on your LinkedIn profile to almost like have continuity in the message that you're saying? And if you've got, 8, 10, 12 different testimonials of people that are peers that have worked with you, leaders that you've worked for, I know as a recruiter, I get more confidence of like, okay, this person looks credible, sounds credible. And actually I know that person. I've spoken to that person before that they have like got this testimonial from, and they've also worked for credible businesses. Then that then just gives me additional confidence that I should be speaking to this person. So it's a simple things that everyone can do. It's just ask for recommendations of people that they've worked for with to just compound the message and just get a bit more consistency, which I actually find QA guys and gals, they are pretty good at being socially engaged on LinkedIn. And actually they're quite good at having testimonials. But if you're not and you're new to it, then that'll be like one basic thing that I'd encourage people to do.
So one of the interesting things about testimonials is people don't like asking for them. So is the strategy to give someone a testimonial first without asking for anything and just give lots of testimonials out in hope that you then get some in return? Or do you specifically ask people, can you give me a testimonial for job X?
I would go and just ask, because people are busy. And I think that if you just wait, then things will just never happen, right?
See, there's the sales attitude. So we need to develop the sales attitude of going out and specifically asking for things.
Yeah, and I think it's like a simple message like, hey, look, I'm looking for a new job in today's market. I'm really looking to build out my LinkedIn profile. We've had a history of working together. Would you be happy to write a recommendation on your experience working with me as a developer or as a tester? And maybe even take it one step further, being like, I would really like to convey this type of message in the market. And if that is a message that resonates with you, then feel free to, say what needs to be said. And, if that person's got a good experience working with you, they'll more than happily invest that like a couple of minutes into writing. And it doesn't need to be lengthy. It just needs to be, 3 or 4 sentences that just compounds the message that you're trying to convey, really.
Okay, so again, and that's part of we are pitching for work. So we're trying to do the sales. So we want to get the customer testimonials on our websites that say we can do this to push it through. One of the things that, because you're a recruiter in the middle, you're pitching a smaller subset of people to jobs. So you're trying to find the best fit people for that role to give your end client the best benefit.
Yeah.
people who are going through applying to a job for a recruiter hopefully have the advantage that the recruiter believes in that person to some extent, right? But the recruiter, you're in the position where you have to believe in the 10 people that you have put through for that role.
Yeah.
Do you play? How do you play favorites? How do you this? Is there? I don't know. Do you look at it and go, oh, I've got 5 great people and only one of them can get the job? This is.
Yeah, I think fortunately, we have to be relatively brutal and put the people into the business that is going to represent, and we put it is by an extension, a representation of my brand. So I need to be able to protect my brand, my credibility. So if there are people that I've interviewed for me previously, it's been good feedback, I've met them, I gel with them, I believe them, they've been referenced, then those people automatically get priority seat when it comes to me submitting them for a job. I always use like the analogy when it comes to just like our own business development strategies internally when speaking to recruiters. I think it's exactly the same with candidates, is that like if you're on the job boards just applying for jobs, you are essentially that person standing in a queue to get into a nightclub, knowing that the nightclub's more than likely already full, and even when you get to the front, you're never going to get in the first instance. So you probably need to do it with a potential chance, but what you really need to do is either make friends with the owner of the club or the manager, and you'll just walk straight on in. And that is the people that have, worked with you, for you before, or you then need to build relationships with your recruiters, which we could be the doorman. We can put you into the VIP lane where you're there with maybe, 10, 15 others, but you've got a better chance of getting in, i.e. an interview. So if you're in today's market, I'd actually say that they are your 2 best tactics to use to win in today's market. So if I was a QA or if I was anyone looking at finding a job, I would be like, who are the companies I've worked for? Where have those colleagues now moved on? I would then build a target list, whether it's an Excel, Google Doc, or a Notion database. I'll build a list of all of those companies. I would then follow all of those companies because LinkedIn adverts are expensive, 500 quid a go. So a startup business might not have 500 quid that they want to spend on an advert that they might not get a guaranteed return on, but they might put a post on their own LinkedIn page saying, we are recruiting for 10 new people. So if you're following that, and then I don't know if everyone's ever seen it, but LinkedIn have a fantastic way of updating new features without really telling anyone about it. This feature's been around for a while, but there's a little bell notification. So it's a little like bell symbol. If you click on that on the company page and then click follow all or receive all, you are then just notified in your feed of every bit of information that that company's posting about. So that might be a job. It might be a case that they've just received 20 million in funding. Well, if they've received 20 million in funding, there'll more than likely be some level of growth. So can you then proactively reach out to the manager down there saying, hey, congratulations on 20 million in funding. Often that means growth. I've got experience solving problems in your world. If you look to hire anyone in the next, 4 to 6 weeks with my skill and experience, I'd love to build a relationship with you so that I'm, in the front seat. So you can do that with company pages. You can also do that with managers. Obviously, there's certain people like yourself, Alan, that you post and push content. So if anyone's following you, they would obviously just be notified of all the good wisdom that you're pouring into the community. So I'll take those 2 tactics and then try and identify what is the level of borrowed authority. Ultimately, people have buying habits, right? So if a manager has previously worked for Just Eat, for example, and you have worked for Just Eat, you can go to the manager and say, hey, I see you're ex-Just Eat. You've got that thing in common. Immediately, you're probably going to spark a conversation. I think people are trying to see it as, I need to get a job. Think of the short-term win of how do I create a conversation rather than get a job. You create enough conversations, enough of those conversations will convert into interviews, and enough of those interviews will then convert into potential job opportunities for you. And that would be the way that I would approach the market, is build a list of your target people using the follow so that you've then got that information coming into your world so that you can then act on it. And then your email outreach to those managers and your email outreach, from a sales psychology point of view, I would make it about them, less about you. I'd make sure that it's got a word count of 120 words or less. So statistically, when it comes to sales email, like psychology, that there's about a 68% drop off rate as soon as it goes above 120 word count. I know then like, you can use ChatGPT to play around with the language that resonates. I've probably got a few templates myself that I can maybe share with you to then distribute to other people as well. But yeah, definitely make it about them, less about you. And if it is about you, talk about the problems that you can solve that essentially helps them, because I think we're just in a period of like, everything's just emotional. Like the world is going to shit at the moment. We've just come from like 2.5 years of volatility, like everything, and look, the recruitment process is just, it's just broken. It's no one likes it. No one enjoys it. It's quite an emotional like drain on everyone. But if you can then start to appease to people's like emotions, when I approach talent people from a business development point of view, like I always try and give the perception that I understand them, is that like, hey, I understand that you're understaffed, under-resourced, underappreciated, more candidates than ever before, and more often from TAs that I speak with is that they're feeling burnt out, which is subsequently creating a need for more agency support, because you can't do everything, because there's this amount of candidates that are available on the network looking for work. But it gives the perception of like, okay, Jack understands me, the feelings and the pressures that I've got, and therefore actually I should respond to him because he understands me better than like just a recruiter reaching out to a talent person saying, hey, I've got 10 of the world's best testers, here they are. It's like, well, you just fall into the category of every other recruiter doing exactly the same thing. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it makes complete sense. And so there's a whole bunch of incredibly useful stuff there about how to network on LinkedIn that is useful. And the one big takeaway for hopefully everyone is you don't just reply interested when someone's posted a job advert.
If anything, you just go immediately into the blacklist of like people I shouldn't be speaking with.
And I didn't know about the ting button. That's really interesting. So I'm going to look for that. But I assume your feed is still filled with George likes this, Bob celebrates this. I have a Tamper Monkey script that gets rid of all that stuff when I'm looking at LinkedIn to make the feed a little bit better. I don't know how. I don't suppose LinkedIn approve of things like that. But if you're anything that helps cut down your feed is probably useful. And you've mentioned LinkedIn a lot. Is that the main site that people should be looking at, or are there other sites that are useful?
I think it's still like the main site that everyone like goes to. I mean, there is a world where there needs to be like a new LinkedIn, if I was being like brutally honest. But I think LinkedIn have monopolized that market. It's still the go-to place. I think they're monetizing it in the wrong way, if I was being like brutally honest, where you can just like, when I used to post content, for example, I used to have anywhere between like 40 to 60,000 people view it. Whereas, I post content now and, I'm talking 3,000 to 4,000 people that might view it. It's still obviously a decent number of people, but ultimately you're just like a freelancer to the AI algorithm. As soon as they change it, then, ultimately you then need to adapt and change with the times. And I think that...
Yeah, LinkedIn is odd as a feed because also you don't just want to follow what's popular. Change your feed settings so you're seeing what's latest, because then you see everything that's coming through.
Yeah.
But then you have to try and filter it somehow. But hopefully most testers, or many testers that are doing automated execution and are technical, could easily write a Tamper Monkey script to pull things out of the DOM that are not relevant to them. So that's a challenge to every tester who is trying to find a job. Learn how to use Tamper Monkey, create a little script that removes Bob celebrates this and any ads from your feed so that you can do it.
Okay.
And if anyone needs help doing that, they can contact me through they can sign up to my Patreon and then message me that way, and then I'll give them tips. But so one of the things that's interesting is some people are having to apply directly at jobs, other people's going through recruiters. Sometimes we get contacted by recruiters, and I don't believe all recruiters are as good as you. So I don't believe that all recruiters are telling people, look, I put you forward and nothing came of it, or I know we spoke, but I'm not putting you forward, and then don't follow up. So when should people bypass a recruiter and go direct to a company, even if a recruiter has been in touch?
I think if a recruiter has been in touch and they follow up immediately with some form of written contact, whether that is like thanking them for the time, giving them a job description of some kind, then you know that it is a bona fide job that they are actively working. And if they've then responded with the job description, then you're automatically in their world and they're more than likely going to be submitted. But I use rules of engagement, right? It seems a little bit formal, but I speak to a candidate. I then send them a job description with the rules of engagement. I get the candidates to then respond with like their salary expectations, notice periods, right to work in the UK, all the usual stuff, just so that I've then got a digital copy of that. If a candidate has received that from me, that means to me that I'm engaged with them, I'm invested in them, they're being put forward to the client that I'm working with. Now, not all recruiters work like that, but I guess like the message is that if you're not receiving any formal contact, then if you've just had a phone call with a recruiter that's telling you they're going to put you through for a job, then if not received anything from them within a few hours, then I'd be calling them back being, I've not received anything from you. Is this a real thing or am I just another number? So I think that's the quickest like litmus test. And a good recruiter will save you a number as well. So if they then don't pick up the phone and have your name saved, then yeah, like, are they really like invested in you? More than likely not.
So that's the follow-up thing again. That's part of that sales. So it sounds like we need to learn sales as well as marketing and testing
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you're, yeah.
and AI and
Yeah.
DevOps and all the tech. So one of the interesting things about going through recruiter is the recruiter is advocating for you. So you got that on your
Yeah.
side. So you probably at that point don't need to do the necessarily follow up with the company directly, and because you're relying on the recruiter doing that.
Yeah. I think actually, if you sometimes follow with the company directly, you can do more damage than good. So I think if you're going with a recruiter and you've got the, the open dialogue, I'd always get like on WhatsApp terms with a candidate quite quickly. If you're on WhatsApp, like you WhatsApp your friends, right? So immediately you are then on like friendly terms with whoever that you're working with. So if you're on that level, then you just got to basically trust that the recruiter's doing everything in their power to make stuff happen on your behalf. And if you've not heard from them from a few days, then yeah, just drop them a message. They'll more than likely be able to respond to you in quick time around what the state of play is with your application.
Okay. So if we go back to trends again, so we've got trends just in terms of there's not enough jobs for the number of people looking. How are salary ranges faring in the current market?
It's a really hard one to really drill down on because there's so many different job titles and nuances for a QA, a tester these days. But if we were just talking, say, QA engineer, which I think covers a majority of that bracket, UK wide, you're looking at probably 55 grand is a bit of like an industry average. I'd say that you're maxing out maybe around that 70,000. And that's for like a solid mid-level QA engineer. Senior QA engineers, you're talking probably 60 to 65 as the average to maybe a max up to about 80. And then lead level, I'd say that like 70 grand up to about 85. And that's UK wide. And that will then cover the remote jobs into that bracket. Most of the work that I've done over my career has been more in the London area. So I'd say that my knowledge of salaries is more equipped to educating people on what's actually happening in London. So London is typically QA engineer about 65k, max being about 75. Seniors, the gap widens for a senior. I think people's definition of a senior like one person senior in a startup is very different to a senior in an enterprise business. But anything from 75 up to about 100k is what I've typically been like placing. And then lead, anything from 85 has been up to about 140, but that is, you've got a very uniqueness if you're at that top end of market. So, but I'd say that to get the upper percentage of that market, you're doing something that is more technical, more niche, and you're more than likely getting into the realms of, as a QA, you're doing automation, you're more than likely starting to get into monitoring and alerting and into that SRE skill set, a bit more on like that infrastructure as code level or operational acceptance testing. So, and that's where the demand is the nicheness in the market, because it's where companies and not getting the talent when they are putting up a job advert and say they don't have an agency budget to use, they're getting hundreds of applicants. But if they're looking for that skill set, then that's the thing that you really need to capitalize on, because there's not enough good talent in the market that has that operational acceptance testing or infrastructure as code or the performance of the security, the non-functional elements. I think because of the adoption of AI, I think that there is a heavier reliance on, I guess, more like the DevSecOps, SRE type skills that are becoming a growing demand, certainly with the clients that I've worked with. And again, that might be a slightly polarized view, because the types of clients I work with in the types of industries, I've also validated that with other people that are QA recruiters, that there is consistency on what I've experienced, but as well.
Okay. So one of the interesting things about having a recruiter in the middle is that you are probably better placed to educate the hiring company on salary ranges. So, because you'll know the span, you'll know the kind of people that you put in for other areas. They're just looking at what do we want to pay. So you're able to then educate them what they can expect to get for that money, and potentially advocate for higher ranges or set their expectations properly for what they're going to get for their money.
If there's an organization that's got a head of QA or QA leader in the business, then they're actually pretty well tuned into the market conditions around what they should be paying for like good talent. So if there is an organization where as a director of engineering or an engineering manager is the leader and it's maybe the first time they're hiring for someone, then their expectations on salaries are often out of sync, and therefore they require some education. And sometimes they just have to go through the pain of hiring, whether that pain of hiring is direct and they've not got the person, they come to an agency. I would always try and set expectations clearly up front. And it's then down to me to decide whether the juice is worth the squeeze of if they're not really open to being consulted with around what they should be paying, then should I really be working with them? So there's certain factors that I assess on, should I actually work with this company or not? But I think there's quite an over-reliance of, there's a shit ton of people in the market at the moment. So people will be able to get people for that because there's more people in the market. And I think there is an element of that happening out there.
Okay. So one of the interesting things then people always do is they have to so they'll look at the testing salary bands that you've given, and you also recruit in the development space. How do those salary bands compare with development?
I'd say they're not as misaligned as what people would potentially feel maybe in the QA community. I think that, I think sometimes the people in the QA community feel a little bit battered and bruised because they're the first to let go, the last to be recovered into the business. It's obviously got a very different skill set. I think that with the adoption of, say, AI, there's a shit ton of AI tools just being poured into the market. Developers are starting to use all of these tools, but they then need someone who's going to be able to assess the risk of all of these new tools that are being brought into the business. So I think that your then value to the business gets increased, because what is then the impact on the customer? And if you then start to bring stuff in that has a big impact on the customer, and you've not got that voice of reason to assess the risk, then I think that your value is immediately justified in the company. Not all companies will think that way, however.
Because I think a lot of people, they look at their current career in testing and they go, all right, so I can do testing, I can do test automation, maybe I should move into programming. And it sounds like that wouldn't necessarily help them unless they're a specific type of person who has, I've done programming in the past, I do testing. For me, it's the same thing. For a lot of people, programming is completely different, but it doesn't sound like you're advocating that people do that for their next career move, because it probably won't help them. So if someone is out of work at the moment, what should they be doing to help, other than networking and learning how to do sales and everything else? What should they be doing with their skill set and experience to try and get the next role?
I think the first thing that people should look at is don't think about the next role. Think about the next 2 or 3 roles that you want, where you want to be taking your career. And does that mean that you're still in quality, or does that mean that future career is that you become product manager, or you become a leader of QA, or do you become a security person or a SRE person? The beautiful thing about QA is that everyone, because they work with such a broad range of individuals and they work across the software delivery lifecycle, that actually you've got more options available to you than, say, developers. Some might not agree to that, but I see it. I've got enough people. I've got 27,000 connections, with a majority of those being in the QA space. So I've got a ton of information coming into my world. I see the patterns of like, well, actually, there is a lot of QA folk going into product leadership type positions because they're creative, they're socially engaged, they're able to communicate a particular story. They've got the communication skills to influence change, but they've also got the product mindset because they're thinking about the customers. So if you're a QA in the product space is an area and that's the skills that you want to harness and utilize, then that's a good career choice from you. And if you wanted to go down that career choice, I would then look finding someone who's made that transition, find them on LinkedIn, message them, and what can you take from that person that's gone through that career transition? And did they strategically do something? Did it organically happen? And sometimes it's right time, right place, right company where that has organically happened. But can that person still give the advice of, well, actually, was it organically happened? These are the skills that I really needed to work on, so they can then take that and then work on those skills. I've obviously never been in that position where I've gone and had to make those changes myself. But again, it's that proactiveness that maybe the sales piece that you're referencing is that you've got to be willing to reach out to people in that way to the desired outcome that you're looking to achieve.
Cool. And so you get CVs in, you filter them, you know the people, you're doing networking. Thing that you don't have control over is what the company then does during the recruitment process, like their interviews, whether they make people do tests or technical tests or take-home tests. What kind of trends are you seeing in that process?
I think we do still have a level of influence, particularly around speeding up the process, particularly if like there's a candidate that they like or a candidate that they like and those candidates have got other things going on. We can then say like, look, this is what the other candidate's got going on. You're the preference. However, we're going to need to speed up the process so we can manipulate a situation to get the best desired outcome so that they're not essentially losing out. If it's a case that the hiring process is too long, too convoluted, we take feedback from the candidates. We can then present that feedback, back it up with data to get people to maybe reshape their processes. So we can make an influence.
So that's one of the benefits then of going through the recruiter aspect to getting a job, that you may not have to go through all those hurdles that are put in place in other companies.
Yeah. And I guess like a good recruiter will spend the time going down, meeting the customer, understanding all of the people involved in the hiring process, right down to like client personas, what is their characteristic, what is their communication style, tools, technologies, problems they're solving, everything that we need to know. And then we'll obviously put all that information in an interview confirmation, interview prep. We'll then obviously put that into, a doc for people to then read to help them prepare so they've got the best chance of success. So if it's a case that, I work with company called Willis Towers Watson, big actuary business, Steve Jeffries, director of QA. He's gone to Whoostef, he's gone to Eurostar to speak. So I've got a very good relationship with him. I know exactly who he is, what he's about. I will say like, look, here's some of his talks. If you really want to know Steve, what he's about, then go look at these talks. That'll give you the best insight to his mindset, how he views quality, so that when you then go into an interview, maybe that becomes a framework of the conversation. One, it shows that you've taken time to do the research, but two, you might be able to then resonate on some of the things that are the viewpoint of Steve and what is your own experience on it. So those are the little nuances that I guess we as recruiters use to make sure that, we're giving candidates the best chance of success.
So one of the things that you mentioned there, you triggered me in terms of thinking, all right, interviews. And it's like, interviews are really interesting situation and people don't often, certain people don't have a lot of experience of doing interviews. What style should people approach in interviews? And whatever advice you say at this point, I will probably completely ignore because I ask too many questions in interviews. Sometimes if someone asks me a question, I'll give them an answer and it will end with a question because then I want more information back from them.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get as much information from them as they are from me, because I think the interview process is a back and forward, not just the person hiring trying to get the information. But what advice do you give to people for interview situations, other than being prepared and know who the person is? Because we always do that, but that back and forth dynamic.
It's a hard one for me. I've not sat on an interview for a very long time, and I don't sit on the interview panel, so I don't get to see how the initiation, the structure. But they normally start with an introduction, and then they're normally quite warm, like to like get into. And I think that it's easier for me to maybe answer that if you are hiring for a QA leader, what does a good interview process look like? So I'd say that like a good interview process would be initial call, 30 to 60 minutes. I would keep it relatively like informal to walk through skill experience in relation to the role, and maybe have a subset of questions that are maybe not vague, not ambiguous, allows people to show their particular perspective on a subject that may be important to the business or maybe the problems that you're trying to solve at that particular time. And if the chemistry is right, can they communicate? Can they articulate? If there's particular prompts that they're given, can they pick up on the prompts? And does it naturally feel like it was a good conversation? Then I think that's a good starting point. If you're looking for someone technical, let's face it, most roles are technical to some degree. If it's a case that you're looking for, I don't know, say an STEP, like particularly with test infrastructure nowadays, I think it's getting more complex. And I think it will continue to get more complex as AI evolves and projects around AI kick on. Then I think it's more around the architecture rather than actually the code.
And so by architecture, do you mean the system architecture, like people using Terraform, Terragrant?
So whether you do like a system, like if you show like a bit of a dummy architecture of one of the projects that you're maybe working on, are there elements that you specifically left out? Can that person assess what is wrong with it? Can they test it? What questions are they asking? Are they asking the right questions? Are you giving them prompts? Can they pick up on the prompts? And if there is some element of code to do it a pairing style, or get them to raise like a PR and then, make comment on some developer code that maybe isn't necessarily in their natural language, because I think, good QAs, they need to be adaptable. They need to be able to essentially read something that isn't necessarily in their native language. So I guess that gives you a little bit more real life scenario of what it's like working with this person. And if that then goes well, then I think you then do more of like your final interview, which is how you deal with conflict, how you manage and influence like decisions and culture fit. And so if I was a hiring manager, I'd follow a similar structure to that. And that works really well with a lot of the clients who I know hire a lot of the best talent in the QA space.
Okay. So one of the things, so we've covered the uncertainty in the job market just because so many people are making redundancies. Funding is not as easy to get hold of. People have overhired. There's jobless redundancy. And then you've got AI coming in. So people are not just nervous about just normal management nonsense.
Yep.
They're now nervous about AI taking over jobs. And that is still in its infancy. But how are you seeing that impact what hirers are looking for in people?
I've worked on a few like AI QA positions now, so they are now becoming a thing. I think that they will continue to become a thing. I think that, AI is now this new shiny tool. A lot of like VCs are back in businesses that are pouring time and effort into AI. But I think that like fundamentally what companies need to be doing is like, how do I measure the ROI on AI? And I think that there's certain elements of AI that is working well. So you've got like the whole chatbot AI thing, which, Revolut, they have reduced their customer service department by the utilization of AI and the chatbot, because they've got enough documentation, enough data to feed the LLM, the user case out of it from a quality perspective. So the roles I have worked on has been, we are building a chatbot. I need a QA to work specifically on that particular project. And then you've then got like health tech industries, NHS, where there's obviously use cases there, which are starting to kick off projects and it being used well. I think like as a tester, I think as a tester, like you've got to understand that you've got to understand like the large language module. So a lot of these people have done data science degrees, or they've started playing around with the LLMs themselves. And I think that, so there's a guy called Shrey Sharma who I've recently helped secure a job. He talked publicly around AI all over the world. And I think that a lot of people don't necessarily know how to assess AI QA.
So, I mean, it's so new. I mean, I'm not sure. So very few people are getting a chance to use AI at work other than through kind of code completion or chat GPT in emails or the chat systems. Probably not using it for testing specifically. They might use it for test automation. They very often don't understand how these models are created or work, or even the full scope of models that are available to them on Hugging Face or how to experiment with it. So do you think that people are better off understanding AI and it's coming through and experiment with the models than they are like learning something like Terraform and how to do infrastructure as code? Where would you recommend people try and prioritize?
I think it goes back down to like, what is the next job or the next two jobs of where you want to be going? If it's a case that you see yourself potentially down the SRE route, then I would invest your time in getting into the infrastructure layers, the monitoring, alerting, the DevSecOps type skills, because naturally your career might evolve then into becoming a security application engineer longer term. So it might be that's just like the natural progression path that people start to take, maybe.
I mean, it's hard. It's always, I mean, I know it's hard because even in like the DevSecOps realm, they are trying to figure out how can we use AI to do our tools. So everything is completely in flux, but I guess it's your point about looking long term, trying to figure out what we as individuals want to do, view roles as stepping stones towards that.
Yeah.
I feel like I've really grilled you for the last 50 minutes or so. I've just been hammering questions.
That's all good. I like it.
So I think I'm hoping that the recording has worked properly, because I think you've given a phenomenal amount of information. So what we should really, I guess, is what have we not covered that you want to promote? Because I know you've got the TLF. I'm not sure if you're still doing the TLF. Obviously, we should point people at your website and say you're one of the best recruiters available, most trusted recruitment companies out there. And so if you get in touch with you for your recruitment needs, what should we be covering? You need to be selling and promoting at this point.
Yeah, maybe I thought a bit too more on the humble like side rather than like this the self promotion. I'd say that I'm a founder of We Do. We're a small business. We've got two parts to our business. One part is completely irrelevant to like your audience, your listeners. A lot of the QA work that I work on is organic business that comes to me because of like well-trodden like relationships. And a lot of the work that I tend to help companies with now is more around senior appointments, executive search when it comes to hiring like leaders. So yeah, I don't really know how to promote the business other than if you're looking to hire someone in the QA space, then I could definitely help you. And if it's a case that you want to help shaping processes, interview like assessment criteria, got all that information available to me. But yeah, ultimately they get quite a lot of it from this podcast to today, mate. So
and the TLF, are you still doing the TLF?
It's an interesting one, the TLF. It's not like I've got a love-hate relationship with it. As a founder of your business, it's just hard to get the priorities right all at the same time around dealing with the volatility of the market, deal with the hiring needs, hiring people, growing the business, dealing with the brand. And I just found that like it was taking about 6 weeks of my quarter to build it in the way that I wanted to build it. And ultimately, I quite quickly realized that there is already a lot of leadership events already existing. It becomes a bit of an echo chamber of, well, it's the same speakers, same attendees. Is that really what I wanted to be building? So I took a bit of a hiatus around like what I'm actually doing in the events in the community space and really worked out what it was that I wanted to create. I used to run some events when I founded my last business called Method, which were smaller, more intimate, more roundtable. And the whole intent and purpose is that I wanted to learn and understand how people think, how people feel when it comes to the problems they're trying to solve. More often than not, people are needed to solve those problems, and therefore I'd understand their hiring needs. And I was able to tune into a language and build trust and respect because I understand them. When you're running an event of 100 people, you are just running around like a blue ass fly and you don't get the time with the people. So for me, when I do events, it's more of a case of like, how do I build trust, credibility? How do I understand people better being in their company? So because I do.
So I think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think your TLF is a case study in how to do it the hardest way possible.
Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah,
such
I'd
an
vet
individual.
every single person. So I'd reach out to someone, I'd do a video call with them, make sure that they were there. So that when we put people in the room, then ultimately they then got a value, whether that value is being derived from the people in the business, other people in the room, whether it is the speaker, maybe it is just the chats you have over a beer, right? It was the hard way about going about it. But I think that there is an opportunity to do something that I was doing before, maybe not to the extreme of the TLF and then get something in the middle. So, and that's something that I'm kind of like in the process of working on at the moment. And I've teamed up with a chap who belongs to the tech community. And when I think about when I was doing it with Method, and I had a chap called Steve who would be my voice of reasoning. He would tell me all the things that what people thinking were feeling, so we could build great events. And I really enjoyed it, and I've taken the learns from that into this new initiative, which we're still shaping parts of it. So I'll not promote it too much. Let people know that there is something new that is coming, which will be a podcast, which will be community events, which will be career coaching services, which will be CV review and writing services. So it's an additional arm to our talent solution offering rather than just transactional recruitment. You come to us, we put bums on seats. We don't want that. We want to be seen as a bit more of like a holistic talent partner that actually, we are able to create value in other ways through these initiatives. So in the next 3 to 4 weeks, follow me on LinkedIn. You'll be able to see what's about to come. So,
and when we follow, we should click the bell button.
The bell button. Yeah, that's exactly it. You're learning, Alan.
And do you have a name for this yet? Or is that like your stealth startup?
It's called Build Your Edge.
Right. Cool. So that's what we need to look for. Yeah. All right. Best luck for that. And enormous thanks for doing this, because I think there's a lot of value in there. Is there any last minute things you want to cover? Because I know we've been doing this for over an hour now.
Yeah, I will. Probably a lot that I've not covered up. And I think that what I will send through to you, Alan, so that there is something that people have left behind. I will create I don't know whether you called it a white paper, an ebook, or I will put down all of my thoughts and experience so that there is something that people can pick up, use, and I will try and emphasize a little bit more around what does the next role look like, but the future role. So if you're trying to forward plan around, actually, I'm a QA and I want to become a product person, here's how I should go about doing it. If I'm a QA and I want to become an SRE, then here's how I should go about doing it. Or in the DevSecOps space, or if it's a case of actually you really want to double down into the whole AI piece, the things you need to learn is ethical hacking. If it's security, then I can then give a perspective on what you should be doing to get to those next stages of your career. So, give me a bit of time and I'll put something together so that people have got that to lean into as well.
Cool. So I'll put links to things in the show notes and stuff. But for people who are just listening, it's Jack Cole at WeDo. Unfortunately, Jack, you haven't taken everyone's advice on LinkedIn and created a proper personalized URL. So it's Jack-Cole-354BB.
Out of tune I am with Ellen.
But everyone will find you if you search for Jack Cole. WeDo it. All the information is there, and they can follow you and click the bell button. So thanks very much for sharing all of that, Jack. And I think I grilled you quite hard. Sorry about that.
Oh, right. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
A big thank you to Jack for all that information, and thanks to you for tuning in. Remember, you can subscribe wherever podcasts are available or on YouTube, and you can find all the show notes at eviltester.com/show. And if you want to follow Jack, you can find him at wedotech.uk, or just go on LinkedIn, search for Jack Cole and follow him. And remember to click the notification bell on LinkedIn so that you get all the updates that you'll need from him. And you might want to follow me as well. See you in the next episode.